It's good to see so many friends here, friends that we've picked up along the way over the years, because without friends we would be just another band, but as you can see from the photographs around, we're much more than that. I'd also like to thank our sponsors or funders, the Ulster Scots Agency, Northern Ireland Housing Executive, the Urban Village Initiative and Derry Ulster Band District Council Good Relations team. Now what we're going to begin with is a question and answer session here. Feel free, if you want to ask a question, put your hand up, I'll bring the mic down to you. On the panel tonight we have William Moore, Billy Moore, who was inspirational in the forming of, I think it was the Sons of Ulster Billy at that time, John Rankin from the William King Memorial, Kenny McFarland from the Pride of the Orange and Blue, who also sits on the Londonderry Bands Forum. Am I right, Kenny? Right, so if anybody has a question, put their hand up. If not, I'll just get things started by asking all three members. At the beginning, what was your inspiration to get your bands up and going?
Well, I think our inspiration, and I have to say this because I'm sitting in the fountain now, but our inspiration was the William King. So I think whenever we in Irish Street seen that the William King had been created and they'd been out parading, I can remember us coming back from an Easter Monday parade, Prentice Boys Easter Monday parade. I think the parade was in Antrim. And in those days, everybody in Irish Street, I'm sure some of you will remember the location, we all drank in the Brown Bear. We had a few beers and lemonades in those days, but we all drank in the Brown Bear up above the Clondermott House in Clondermott Road. And we were probably envious and probably a bit jealous that the fountain that the fountain had a band. So we in Irish Street decided that it was a must that we would create a band. And a number of us got together, we arranged fundraising activities, we collected around the doors of the estate, and probably like the fountain, the people in Irish Street were quite kind, quite generous, and we managed within a very short period of time to purchase flutes. We went to Owens's in Ballymoney and we bought the first Miller Brown one-key flutes. They weren't very good, but they got us up and running anyway. I think we also purchased our first bass drum. We might have got it free of charge actually. It was the old No Surrender flute band. Gave us their bass drum. They had fast folded, became defunct that stage. So we got their bass drum and lo and behold, we had a band in Irish Street. Certainly not very good, but at that time we thought we were the greatest in the earth.
What year did you kick off then, Billy? The William Kings formed in '73, had their debut in '74, so it would have been around late '74, '75, would it be?
Probably 6 or 9 months after the William Kings. Because, as I said, they give us the motivation and the inspiration. Without their formation, there possibly may not have been a band in Irish Street, but we couldn't let the fountain do something that Irish Street couldn't do likewise.
John, as a founder member of the William Kings, around the time, can you remember what motivated the people? What were the reasons for forming a band? Why you thought you could do it or why you should do it?
Well, I think the first thing, the parade was banned, the year 12th of August was banned in the town, and a young boy called John Hunter got an accordion, and somebody got a drum, and they marched around the fountain, and we decided then about a year after that, we're not far from here, just somewhere around here, outside a lamppost. We were standing one night, and I was telling myself, and Polly, Polly there, and we started chatting about starting a band at the fountain.
Don't come at the table,
Right, okay, right.
He was a fluter, wasn't he? Wasn't a drummer? Because I was going to say he was a bad drummer.
We decided we'd form the band up, and it was the 12th of July. We started walking around and asking people to join the band. Met Polly Dannard, Baden and them boys all out in the field. Asked them to come and join the band. We said they would. Ronnie Rowder there, he was a No Surrender man, and he come to teach the drummers, and he joined the band, yeah. So we got formed in 1973, and one of the things that we made at that time was a rule that you had to be 25. Maybe you were 25, you retired from the band. But as the years went on, 25 moved up and up and up, and well, we're still boys here, we're 25 in the band now, but I'm beside that point. We started off at the start, just making a book, we were in the doors. There were a lot more houses on the fountain estate at that time, it was the old fountain. And we lived in a shilling a week, which is 5 pence for anybody who doesn't know what a shilling is. and we left at £5 or £6. Then we got a certain amount of money, we headed to Belfast, and we bought flutes at £1 each, and we brought them back, and we were taken to the reporter. And the reporter looked at them, and he says, James Galway couldn't blow them. They were that bad. So we marched on the more fundraising activities, and we got a set of flutes. And we had 12 flutes on the street on the first day we were out, and 4 drums. I think 4 drums came from Leckington, accordion. And we get the 4 drums of them, we had a bass drum, and 12 flutes. And we had the streets, and we went to Antrim. I think it was one of our first, not after we were dedicated, we headed to Antrim. And the band was then more or less on the road. So we just grew from strength to strength throughout the years. And even when the times was bad in here, it was a band that sort of kept things together. The trouble was at its height, sort of like that in the 70s and 80s. And it was a band, members was out in the streets at night, most of them anyway, as well as a few other residents as well. And we brought a CD out, I think it's quite accurate, but we say that it's a band of brothers. And that's when we look at everybody in the band as a family. And that's why the band is going strong today.
Don't get up. It's okay, don't get up.
That's not stronger than what's he man?
He's here for the rent.
Probably stronger now than we ever were. And we were very lucky. And the whole thing that kept the band going was discipline. If you have no discipline, you have nothing. So that's what kept the band going, and that's what still keeping the band going today. And as I say, we went from strength to strength. When our wee band started, we didn't like the coach. And they beat us one year. And I was down in Georgia Street cleaning Mondays. And I wagged him down, and he brought me down, and he says, "Will you tell you something?" He says, "You'll never beat us again." Well, that there's 40 years ago. We haven't won since.
Can you see them?
Like, I remember distinctly that Antrim played on Easter Monday, because Ronnie actually brought a newspaper cutting with him, and he read it out, and it's about the William Kings making their debut. And it takes me back to when we were learning the march before we'd even hit the streets. We were in the Britannia Hall. Now, it's not much bigger than this. And Ronnie had us marching around the hall in ranks of 4 with a brush shaft. Do you remember that, Ronnie? Trying to keep the ranks straight. We're like a herd of cows.
Well, just like you say what Polly says there, like Polly says that they formed a band, like they wanted a band like the final. I would just like to ask Polly what happened to them.
We were better than that.
We'll move along to Kenny here.
Actually, before, I can remember before we got the bass drum, we had the flutes and the side drums, but we had no bass drum at this time. So our bass drum during practices in Irish Street Community Centre was the Guinness Book of Records, and that was me that played it. The Guinness Book of Records was our bass drum.
The only records you ever got, Polly, was it? Kenny,
I know we didn't put it in here that I did.
were you in Foil Defenders, right? So you want to start with Foil Defenders and then move on quickly to the Pride of the Orange and Blue?
I think like everything else, there was that whole, when we go back that time, there was a lot of, places like the Buildings, was people were coming from all over the city. The exodus was in full flight, and I think when the band started, I think it gave a focus for the community. And I always think when I was 14 or 15 when we were starting, and it was older people that started the band, it was parents and so forth, but the driving force was people like myself and Barney, who was out every night collecting off for weekends.
And you would have been young teenagers at this time?
So, but I mean, we're band mad and just wanted to be in a band, and the Foil Defenders came along, and the Foil Defenders were completely different from what these bands were, because they were mainly young people, whereas the young teenagers and so forth, and they were run by themselves, where the Foil Defenders were run by a wider, older people, and it was mixed with girls and boys and so forth, and maybe slightly younger. But when we look back in time, and at the time it was all exciting, it was just to get a band on the road. But people forget it, the Buildings was quite nationalist at that time. If you're ever on the Doncaster Road, and I know there was a chapel still there, but there were three blocks of houses, and I think there was only 2 Protestant families on there. And all the back end was really people coming from Rosemount, Craigan, even places like St Johnstone at the time where there was trouble. So we had the old families, we said the Buildings families, and I think that band was the catalyst to bring that whole community together. I mean, we marched around practicing and so forth, and and it was a great focus for the whole community, because, as I say, people out there were actually thinking, where do we go from here, if anything else, because at that time they were talking about building a new chapel and schools and so forth, and people were thinking, what are we going to do? And when I look back, the band was it was actually a quite big band, even though there was a lot of young people. I mean, I think we had 33, 34 fluters and 6 drummers and so forth. And I think but it brought it brought a sense of community to the buildings that I think sometimes it's easily forgot about, but bands actually done at that particular time. I mean, I'm sure Lincoln Courts was something similar, what was happening in places like Nansen Drive and Tully Alley. So there was a lot of stuff that when I look back at, people maybe forgot about the Fire Defenders, but for me, in the buildings as a resident and part of the community, I think we never ever put enough thanks to that group of people who came together, as I say. I remember it snowing and raining and a dark, cold winter's night, and me and Barney out knocking doors, getting 50p a door. But we got the band going, and as I say, that went over time. Our whole thing was, the Fire Defenders, as I say, was very, very conservative, with a lot of older people. They really didn't want to do what we wanted to do, and there was a lot of strife continually, to be quite honest. Even to change a start in the band, had to go through a committee of maybe 25 people, and you had Anna Hay and the whole team around, and it was, but as I say, there was a lot of good stuff. And in 79, there was a dispute about, they wouldn't march with the DEP or something silly, but it was more likely the thing that ignited us to say we want to go, and we'll never have any other band march around this village but ourselves. So we went and started in 79, and we actually went out, myself, Barney and Johnny Keys, we actually went out. Burntollet had actually just started as well. We went out to Burntollet and marched with them for a year, which, I don't know if we helped them, but we were bands people, and I know that they were actually, it was actually, what I call it, young and taught them, Scott, went out in Trevor McKinley. So there's a lot of working together and stuff like that there, and I think when you look back, it was important. We got the band up and running, and as I say, we more likely, when these bands were settling down, we had a mad 2 years in the buildings where basically when the band went out, we had a band of 70, and no matter where we went, we sort of ended up with a police escort and told never to come back again. So there was that madness, and I think when we look back at, sometimes we all forget now, young people who are in bands don't actually appreciate what those bands done for those young people, because we give them a focus and we actually give them something positive to do. So.
Wally, we were just opening up here talking about the formation of bands, what the inspiration and motivation was. In your case with the Sons and Lindsay Mooney's, was it to form a band to remember Lindsay Mooney, or was just going to form a band and then decided to name it after Lindsay Mooney? So what order did things come and what got you going?
I didn't hear what John had to say, but
it was all good constructive stuff.
There you are. The two bands, I suppose, came out of fatalities, out of death that happened. Lindsay Mooney was, his father was Norman Mooney from up here in the Barrack Lane area, Carrick Street. And Norman was in the No Surrenders for many years, and very, very loyal, faithful member of that band. And then whenever the Exodus, as we now call it, started and people moved out, those families moved out onto the new estate of Lincoln Courts and Clinton. Those estates weren't established in areas where Protestant Unionists lived, like Irish Street. So they had to form themselves, they had to form their own community groups, they had to get to know who was the neighbour down the street, and there was all that type of stuff. Lindsay Mooney worked in the council. He was a guy of high standing. He was second in line in the choir here in St Columb's Cathedral, and he was 19 years of age, and he died tragically, and that was something that had to be remembered. There was never going to be a band, to my knowledge, other than whenever the incident happened, we felt there had to be some form of remembrance of Lindsay Mooney. Before that, we had the William Kings, and I had watched the William Kings marching, and I thought, hey, that is amazing. the sound that they have. We were used to the old established bands, and suddenly we had this new beat and this new sound. And so we went and formed a band, and we grew very quickly. There was, I remember there was major discussions about who would beat the bass drum and who would play the cymbals and who would do all this, went through all that Storm and Norman Foreman type stuff that happened. And we moved very quickly. I think within a very short period, and John will agree with me, we overtook the William Keys.
At least he said you overtook the William Keys, because you never overtook Irish Station.
Anyway,
You drank it before you come up.
all I'm going to say, we started to look at music in a slightly different way from the what they call the keep the pope, and we bought better instruments than the ones that people have bought in Essie's shop in Belfast or Bruce Ford's in Bond Street, and we went on and we started to play some marches. We had a very interesting time when we brought over what was probably the top band in the world at that time, the Craig Nuke Faith Defenders from Wisha in Scotland. We brought them over, and we had an enlightening experience to listen to the new music that they were playing. And I remember them marching up through Lincoln Courts, and they were playing a tune called The Blanket on the Ground. And we'd never thought that, these country things, you could put them into music, and it was an amazing experience to see them. And I've seen them back in the town this year again. And we then went on, and we brought in a guy called Wally Douglas, who passed away a few years ago from Baviva outside Dungiven, and he started to learn us flutes. It wasn't ABCs anymore, and the type of that. I know, John, you're still struggling with that. It was proper music, John. I'll show it to you sometime.
Stop that. Delete much good on it.
We went on.
This could deteriorate, couldn't it?
We won the Northwest in Limavady, and somebody said James is here.
Right,
James is there. I'm going to tell a story with James. Before we went into the competition, Wally Douglas says, "Look, you've only won this tonight. Without a doubt, I've listened to the other bands, and you're going to win this." And he says, "Whatever you've won, it's not up for you to cheer yourselves because you've won. It's up to the audience to cheer that you are the best band. So I don't want to hear any cheering from the band. Let the other bands cheer that they're the best." So we duly won. We won by a country mile. I think it was like that, Mitchell. And we won by a country mile, and everybody did clap and cheer. And then two boys, Jamesy was one of them, slipped out of the hall just before they went on to do the part announcement. And they went out and just round, and there was toilets there. And the two of them went into the toilets, and we were all sitting waiting on the announcer. And we heard this roaring and cheering and the banging of the toilet doors. And that was Jamesy and Spock went out, I think, to have their own wee cheer. They couldn't wait any longer. But those were magnificent times. And then we went on then and we played in the All Ireland. I think you were in that as well, John, of a programme somewhere. And we went up and we beat some very good bands there, Onward and Hillview and bands like that. And you were there as well, John. It was good stuff. And it was in fact in the Guildhall. And I remember we came up to Jackie Allen's bar and we had an amazing time there. Joined by our colleagues, I mean, Steve and the William Keys. So the band developed through. One of the things that, I know you're nodding at me here, I'll stop now. One of the main things that we done was that Wally Douglas wanted better flutes. And I know, and Derek, this is something you need to get on top of, I know he had a cabinet full of Crown AZs in his home, and that's a top quality flute in Baviva. But I went over to England and met a guy called Miller, and he made flutes for the military bands. So I talked him into coming over, and Miller Wicks was John Wicks and John Miller. Miller came over and we met, and from that meeting and from the conversation that we had, he went on then to make those instruments that I think you are still playing today. That opened up. That opened up for bands. I think that better instruments give better sounds, make better bands, and I think that made the drive to get better flutes out there. We had an amazing time in the Lindsay Mini Band and Sergeant Lindsay Mini Band, and it was a great journey. We were more an international band. We just didn't bring people in from the water side. We actually brought people in from Limavady.
You both made very interesting points there about the Exodus. You know, a song that never crossed my mind before, that the Exodus actually fed through into states like in Courts and New Buildings, which is something I've never taken on before. Is there anybody on the floor here who would like to ask a question of the panel?
Could I just say something before?
The boss, John,
I would just like to say that Janice is talking for a long time here. The last time we cheered was 1973. This is 2018 and William King Still's here.
We weren't even formed in 70s.
We're getting ahead of ourselves because you're covering questions that we have for later on.
Norman, if we can just say, that particular period of time in Northern Ireland, the early 70s, right through to the mid 70s, every housing estate in Northern Ireland was having its own band. Young people were coming together because there was very few things for young people to do at that particular time in Northern Ireland. You were probably at the height of the Troubles and the height of the murder campaign. So young people stayed within their own areas. So to give them something, a focus in life, focus for something to do, everyone joined a local band. So that happened not only in Londonderry and the estates in Londonderry, but it happened throughout Northern Ireland.
I was going to ask a question here about rivalries, but I think we've covered that. Yes, certainly.
There made one comment about Piercy Hamilton, who was a great man in the band here, Piercy's father. They lived next door to Gate in Masonette. And you said,
Formerly a Fountain Place, am I right?
you said together for about 3 weeks. You were took him to a flute up in the house in Fountain Street.
Yes, that's right.
And Piercy says to me, he says, what's going on there? I said, it's a new Fountain band starting. So we went across the street and up, and it only takes about 5 months. So there's just a band and everything around. They can't even read music.
I remember Piercy Hamilton, actually, I was in the Thieville accordion band before we joined Irish Street. As a young boy of 13, 14 years of age. And Piercy, I remember my father could always play the accordion, so I was able to pick it up by ear. And I remember sitting in the Thieville band shed in Georgia Street, I think it is. And I remember sitting during a break and interval, I was sitting playing away these party tunes. But as you quite rightly said, Alistair, the Thieville band played by music, and everyone had sheets of music in front of them. But I was hopeless at reading music, but I could play everything by ear. And I remember Piercy coming over and hitting me a clip and saying, you don't play tunes like that in your play, you play by music. So I was playing seconds in the accordion, which was and that's all I ever did in the Thieville. But they learned the music.
Does anybody else want to add something? One at a time, I'll get to you. The next thing I had was rivalries, but I think we've covered that. There was a good friendly rivalry between all the bands. And memorable occasions. Start with you, Kenny. You know, highs or lows, or really memorable occasions or events that the bands took part in.
I suppose the thing would have been the first time we went to Scotland. I think Scotland was amazing. It was an eye-opener to see how trades were organised and the standard of bands. But the first time we went over, we actually...
What year would that have been, Kenny? This is a time when most teenagers are working out in Northern Ireland.
82 when we went over to Scotland for the first time. It was actually the Black Parade in Glasgow. the first 4 years our band had actually, we couldn't get a lodge in this town, which you think is crazy now, but at that time it was very hard. So the first 4 years we were actually in Belfast, so we walked before 3 different lodges in East Belfast. St Brennan's, the first time we phoned up, it was at that time we didn't have phones, or there wasn't that many phones and things. Belfast Telegraph was a lodge looking for a band, so we were looking for a lodge, so we phoned up and the boys said we're St Brennan's, and we thought this is a ticket hand, you know, St Brennan's. But anyway, we went up and seen them, and we went up and I think but how they do things in Scotland, I have to say, is incredible. Our first 12 was the bus was free, went up, it's on to eat, you walk from the master's house, and I think in this part of the world we don't actually do that very well. I always thought in Scotland as well, it was great. Leaving, you're playing the hymn and the master's brought out and you march down the street and the family and friends and all, and then they walk you about 5 miles into Templemore Avenue, and then you do another 10 or 12. So it's a massive walk, but I think Sturdy and Claude and all was down there. We came back from, so we went over to the Black Parade, and we led the Glasgow Black through the centre of Glasgow, got on buses and then travelled down there. We done Ayr, which was massive crowds and a great day, and came back then, had to travel the whole way back to Glasgow again. But when we came off at below the railway station there, Central, and when we came walking up that street, the Rangers fans had come, so they were all on one side. Celtic was returning from wherever they were all in Central Station. And I think, you know, the hair standing, you were going up that street and the noise was absolutely incredible. It was a lot of travel, we were tired, we were knackered, but that day just loved it today. And to be quite honest, the Black Parades in Glasgow at that time was an incredible parade to take part in. It was well organised and everything was done right. So I always think when we went to Scotland, it was great. My personal opinion, every time the Orange and Blue walks through those gates, I think it's incredible. I think the most favourite place in the world is going through Fergie Street and Fergie getting up Fergie Street. I think you're walking in the footsteps of those who went before. So we can talk about the whole world, but I just think marching this city and being allowed to walk in the city, I think is the most treasured thing for me when I was
Exercising your right to walk in the city. I think of the words you're looking for. Exercising your right to walk in your city.
Yeah.
John, memorable occasions for the William Kings. We know about the sad ones. So
Well, the sad ones, I would just like to comment on the sad ones as you mentioned them. The older boys in the band, the sad ones have never left us. That's the long and short of it. But we're not going to dwell on them. As regards going forward, after all them things that happened, the band was united again. They were tragically struck. And at that time, it was around the time 75, 76, the band was struggling a bit to keep members going on the band and keep the thing going. But out of the tragedies that happened, the band united again, and we never looked back since. Now, as regards to good times, I think going up around that diamond is hardly a bit. That's the excitement of it. The year we went to London, we left here. Drew, of course, God rest him, he decided that William King would go to London when those were in the club. Just to give you younger boys a wee idea of what we did do at that time, we left here at 5 o'clock at night on a bus that, looky, you wouldn't put cattle on, really. There was no brand new bus for the band, you see. And we left here at 5 o'clock at night. We travelled to London. We were in London about 1:30 the next day. We went to a substation and the train station, and we got changed on the station. We had no sleep right enough, and we marched in London. We were finished about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and we were allowed 3 or 4 hours in London, and we had to be back in the bus for 10 o'clock at night, which we were, and we travelled back. Now you're wondering how that was a good time. We'd be 4 hours in Soho. And we were all together, and that was good fun. But it was only fun because all the boys were together. But the London trip was very good. Scotland trips were excellent. In fact, any time we went to sleep, we had a ball. We never really knew bar.
I think the trip to London, correct me if I'm wrong, was about the name change.
Yeah. And the console name change.
And Russ Abbott, the comedian, stopped along the way to applaud us and
I say we're old
wondered what
knights.
regiment we were.
We're old knights. We're old party nights in the Talk of Town after we won the championships. So back to Talk of Town, what
Ollie,
was your bar?
we'll come to you. What were the highs for your band at the time?
Well, again, probably there were so many, it's hard to just pick or choose one, but probably as Kenny said, for us young guys, and we're probably still in our late teens, early 20s, well late teens probably, getting to Scotland was certainly our highlight. Because I think for most of us, the furthest we'd ever been was probably Portrush, and here we were heading off to Scotland, and it was Sammy Donaghy, who lived in Finn Gardens in Irish Street, who was worshipful master or secretary of 1062 Lodge in Victoria Hall. Sadly, after Sammy's death, the Lodge folded and became defunct. But Sammy was so keen to get Irish Street, our foot band, out in the street. 12th of July, we didn't even have a uniform, and Sammy encouraged us to go out with black trousers and white shirts. And I don't even think we had tabby bows, but black trousers and white shirts was our uniform. I'm sure I see Russell King sitting down there, or Stephen King, you never could tell the difference. They were our two main leaders, by the way, in the band in the early days. And, but going to Scotland, but our first trip was to a wee mining village outside of Falkirk. It was called Redden and West Quarter, and that was our first trip with a band, organised, as I said, by Sammy Donaghy. 1062 Lodge was Sammy's, and 1007 Lodge took a Hamilton band as well. So we had 2 packed coaches heading off to Falkirk. 1007 with Hamilton's, 1062 Lodge with Irish Street. And I remember in those days nobody stayed in hotels because, as I said, we had very little money. It was the first time away from home for many of us. I remember staying in a tent. We slept in a tent in a fella's backyard in West Quarter. It was a wee mining village, as I said. So 3 or 4 of us were Alan Craig, Coogee as we called him, Alan Mills, myself. We were in a tent in a backyard in Falkirk. So those days, those occasions, those events, at the time they were probably awful, but looking back, they were the happiest days of your life.
Wally, apart from the one time that you beat the William Kings, is there any other highs you can talk about?
No, that's still the best.
Right, we get stuck together.
I know that we've been talking about the trips to Scotland and walking in the city, and of course those are dear moments. I'll move off that then maybe. The band was invited to lead a parade in Bessbrook in the way of the South Armagh, and it was a long trip. Two minibuses took us. You know, it wasn't a big band in those days. We went down to Bessbrook and we were leading the parade, and you know, you go out to Claudia, you go out to New Buildings, and 12, 13 bands out there, and you think this is great. I mean, there was 70 or 80 bands at that parade in Bessbrook in South Armagh, and it was an amazing experience. And then we were invited back to entertain in a hall. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, we got the call that Kevin Lynch, who was a hunger striker from Dungiven, had sadly passed away, and that we need to be careful going home. So we left anyway, and coming down the Glen Shane, we thought we better get something organised here. So there was those sticks that are all together there to stop the snow getting onto the road. So we entangled them and we got them into the bus just in case there was anybody waiting on us. And we got to the chapel at the top of Dungiven, and the police were there, and they says, "You're not going any further, but especially in those uniforms. There's a crowd of 300 or 400 people down the street there, and you're not getting through. You'll be murdered." And we took his advice, and they took us out a road to the right and brought us in round. But by that stage, they had they'd closed off the bottom of the town, so we were taken into the police station in Dungiven, which is now owned by the Presbyterian Church, and we were in there, and we must have stayed there to 6 o'clock in the morning till everybody got tired. So then we were told to make a run for it. And we went out. One of the buses was going to Limavady to drop off our international contingent, and we were heading in And on the way out, we had seen this big sign at Muldoona, and it had a sort of league table of where all these hunger strikers were, Mickey Devine, Kevin Lynch, Bobby Sands, or whatever else was all there, and how many days, 50, 30 or all days. And I think somebody had said, on the way back we'll get that, because that would be nice on the bonfire. And so we stopped, and I think James was in the middle of this as well. And so we got Jamesy on somebody's shoulders and got him up, and he was kicking the sign down. But out of nowhere came these 3 cars, and these boys got out. And we didn't know whether they had shotguns, pellet guns or whatever, but we got the sign down. We had to break it up, remember, James, to get it in and to the wagon. And we headed down, and we were firing. These cars were following us. We were firing bottles at them, and they were swerving. It was like someone had a Wild West, chasing us on the road. And we seriously thought that, I was driving one of them, and we were across the road, and we were trying to keep them from passing me. And I thought, should we just stop and take our chances that they don't have guns? But James says, drive on.
That means you drive under the side of one of the cars.
So we'd hired this minibus. We made it under the city. There was damage up the side of it. There was damage at the back of it where they were firing. But it was owned by a boy that let us away with it. But that was an amazing night. I was like,
I'm sure the historical inquiries team will be looking forward to interviewing you afterwards. Is there anybody on the floor who would want to pitch a question here? No?
I think, but at that particular time, we had a bit of a big band, but nobody had cars. Only maybe 3 or 4. And I always think that when the band was, if you didn't go with the band the Friday or Saturday night from your buildings, you were stuck there. And I think it's completely changed now, and I think that's one of the struggles. We had no other alternative. You were stuck where you were. People stayed in within their own areas, and the troubles created that. So as I say, the people, Stuart and Claude and anybody else was in the band, we were travelling around Northern Ireland. We were never in them places before. And she says, we went to Port Rush, going to Mackerfelt, or we went to Kilkeel one year, and there's always stories about what happened coming home there. But I just think at that particular time there's so much exciting, because you were going to places and there were a lot of trouble, and you were going through areas, and we came through Toon one night and we lost every window in the bus. The only window was the one behind the bus driver, and it hit him, the stone, and we tried to turn it into a water bus and fill it with stones, and then the police came and put us on down. But that was normality. But for a band, that was that building, the friendship and stories, and to be quite honest, a lot of it was, there was like the secrecy was to never tell in the buildings, because then people wouldn't allow their sons to go in them buses. But anyway, it was great times.
So we've covered most things here tonight, and just to finish off, we have a very vibrant, alive and thriving band circuit or band situation, especially through work of the Londonderry Bands Forum, which is invaluable work that we do every year. What do you think the future holds for the band scene? Start with you, Willie.
It's tough times for bands. It's tough times for a lot of activities that we would have previously seen as being major within our communities. Sport. Young people now have so many options how they can look after themselves in their entertainment, and the whole fabric of the loyalist community really needs to kick on, and really needs to settle some issues down and move on. I think the Bands Forum are good for that, raising standards, but it's not easy, and I take my hat off to anybody that is organising a band, and the difficulties that brings with it, the duty of care that you have to young people when you take them out. All those things are more to the fore now than we just loaded young people, and they built a car and took them to
a parade somewhere. Those days are all gone. It's much more difficult now, and you know, for anybody to take on a leadership role in the band now, they need to be assured that that everything has been done right around them, because not only the dangers of all the recreational stuff that happens now, there's the fraud that happens and all that, and the blackmailing that is around that there. No, look, it's not easy, and I wish well anybody that puts their hands up and takes that on.
Bully.
Yeah, I think sometimes, I believe sometimes we have to try and reinvent ourselves, because, you know, what was right and what was good and what was interesting in the mid-1970s isn't interesting in the mid-2000s. So, you know, you look at, and you know, I mentioned there about 1062 Lloyds, they're folded. We look at bands, we look at apprentice boys clubs, they're all struggling to attract and maintain and sustain young people. So we really have to look at how best we can do that. It's not an easy task, but collectively, I think we've got a tradition, we've got a history, we've got a culture that is second to none. And I believe with all that history, all that tradition, all that culture, we can still maintain our beliefs and our heritage. So it's up to every one of us collectively, and we only can achieve this collectively, to ensure that our bands survive, our lodges survive, and our apprentice boys clubs survive. Collectively, we can do that.
John, you anything to add to that?
The only thing I was actually added to say, we're maybe one of the lucky bands here that we got a full, more or less now, a new band on the road, and just, well, they're still number one, and we're lucky that the younger members that's in it now will keep it going for the foreseeable future. As regards parades, I don't know, as regards parades in this town or anywhere else, I was at the 12th of July, seeing them coming home, and I thought the whole parade was just non-existent, more or less. And
In what way? Diminished numbers or no
diminished
atmosphere?
numbers and atmosphere, everything wasn't there that I seen anyway. Maybe I was wrong. And as I say, the only fear I would have is they put the band parades off the street and we started to charge for security. And I think that'll come in years to come, that they will charge for policing the parades. And that if that's the case, the bands will be struggling to put parades on their road.
Kenny.
I'm of the opinion that everything in life goes in circles, and when you look at the 60s, a lot of melody bands really struggled because a lot of young people went into the march and the Blood and Thunder bands and so forth. I think the Blood and Thunder bands evolved and parading, and what happened was we went from doing maybe 20 parades to start doing a lot. There were bands doing 70 and 80 parades a year, which was crazy. I think what we see now is we actually see a lot of bands that was Blood and Thunder now going to the melody. We see bands coming back the way it used to be. You know, bands would have been around Lloyd's bands almost. They'd have been there for the 12th and the big occasions and a few other local parades. And I can see that through whether it be old boys bands or through the way bands are actually doing it this present. But I mean, I seen an article was written 40 years ago, and it basically people were saying the exact same thing. People keep on saying we're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed. In 40 years, I would say we'll still be marching, we'll still have bands. I mean, I think when you look at the example of Churchill and the Hamiltons and so forth, how many times in their history of 180 years did people say, where are we going? We had a famine, we had world wars and so forth, and it continued. So I still think that the difference is young people are not the way, you don't walk around a street now and see 30 young people walking down the street together. And I think what Danny's doing in schools by actually going and doing the tuition will actually be long term, and in a couple of years time those young people will be coming out, they can read music, they're comfortable with it, and I think that's where we have to be. Bands can't sit and wait for people to come through the door, and it's almost like the same for the Orange. Those days are gone. You have to go out there where young people are, and people are interested, because while some areas are struggling, other areas are actually booming. So it's just things to me, and we always talk about the doom, but I mean, there's a new band started this 12th in Eden, up in Plumbridge. Who'd have thought that? The new band was started this year dialogues down in Market Hill. And there's another one somewhere, it's sort of out of my head, but while we talk about decline, there's also other places growing. So, as I say, I'm optimistic. I think our culture is so strong. You know, it's in our blood. You know, I watched Oliver and stuff like that, the grandson, and he can drum. And there's hundreds of other young people out there who will just be band mad, and they'll keep this going.
For those of you who don't know what Kenny was talking about, Andy going into schools as part of an outreach programme through the Londonderry Bands Forum, where he actually goes to the secondary schools, some primary schools, and teaches music and introduces or allows people to explore their culture. Where if you go to, say, a nationalist school, they're taught how to Irish dance, fiddles, and they embrace their own culture. And we're starting to do that now through people like Andrew and the Londonderry Bands Forum. So it's a good positive note to end on.
Same with Darren here, teaches, you know, he's teaching 120 young people the pipe. Darren, or Andy, the back students on summer and schools, and I mean, you see the dancers with James and Georgina. I mean, they're out there now with 1,000 young people throughout the Northwest. And I mean, I think we talk about culture now, and our culture's growing. We just have to be more positive about it, and I think rather than people talking on Facebook what they could do, they should just go out and do it.
Thanks very much. Looking back on high parts or memorable occasions, for me, and I know I speak for Big Hugh too, was when the William Kings were actually approached by the Waterside branch of the Royal British Legion to lead them on Remembrance Sunday. That was definitely a high for me, and it was my favourite parade of the year. Not my favourite, but the one I really like to take part in, because at that time it seemed that we had finally grown up. Well, I think you'll agree it's been a lively and informative discussion. I'd like to thank our panel members, William Lamrock,